All right, welcome back everybody. We are going to do chapter 18, which is about forecasting agricultural commodity production. And we're going to take a little bit more advanced point of view than we did earlier in the textbook. In chapter 8, we introduced the concept of trying to forecast yields for commodities like corn and soybeans. And we talked about the important USDA reports to follow, including the WASDE report that comes out monthly with production estimates, and including the crop progress and condition reports that come out weekly on Monday afternoons. And we noted how the outcome from the crop progress and condition report can be indicative of whether yields will be good or bad in any given year, as especially those really sensitive hot and dry summer months are revealed about how weather is going to look like. So in this chapter, we're going to take a little more analytical perspective to some of the observational point of view that we had in chapter 8. And we're going to think about how we can use regression analysis to take those actual numbers that are outputted in the crop progress and condition report and turn it into a yield forecast that you can be updating every week during each growing year. So as I take a look at this, I have just pasted here a crop progress and condition report from July 16th of the year that this is recorded, 2018. And just recall what is basically in this report. You have the top 18 states that produce corn, and there's tables for other crops like soybeans and wheat and lots of other stuff. Excuse me. But basically what the USDA does is they call up a bunch of people involved in producing these commodities, like farmers or other agribusinesses and business persons who are involved in selling inputs and other stuff to this industry, and they say, how's the crop look in your area, basically. And the respondents are supposed to rate the percent of the crop that fall into these categories: very poor, poor, fair, and good, and excellent. And then what the industry tends to follow is this 18-state average, and you can kind of gauge the health of the aggregate crop based on these numbers. And what is particularly useful, especially as you work into those hot and dry summer months, is to see, are these conditions deteriorating or are they improving? So for example, in the excellent category, compared to the previous week, we have the same percent of the crop in the excellent category, but we've had 3% of the crop drop from the good category and fall down into the fair. We're bumped up 1 point in the fair category, bumped up 1 point in the poor category, and bumped up 1 point in the very poor category. So from the week that was ending July 15th, 2018, we had a little bit of a deterioration in the quality of the crop that was reflected in these changes. And hopefully we could capture that and see what we might expect ultimate yields to come out to be based on that. So to illustrate why we might be able to do that, I've got this plot here in figure 2, which is the percent deviations from trend yield plotted against the percent of the crop that was rated good or excellent. So basically I took the categories good and excellent and added the numbers together to get one measure. And I did that because when you hear market analysts talking on the radio and commenting about what's going on in commodity markets, you'll often hear them talk about that number good and excellent, and they usually add those numbers together. So I thought it would be a good place to start and see if there's anything to these numbers as a metric for being able to forecast yields. And on the y-axis, I have plotted the percent deviation from trend yield. Now recall, back from chapter 8, we've had corn yields trending over time almost at a 45-degree angle in a very linear fashion, with the actual yearly realization sort of bouncing above and below that trend yield line. So to kind of remove the impact of that trend, I took those yield realizations from years 1986 all the way through 2018 and calculated what the trend yield is, and then calculated each year's percent deviation from trend yield. And later in this chapter's activity or exercises, we'll do that same calculation, so you'll see the process that goes into calculating what's on the y-axis in this chart. But if you plot percent deviation from trend yield, you should note that things that are above the 0 line are good yield realizations. We had years where yields were above trend, and then we have some years where yield falls below trend. And if I recall, these two dots over here that are nearly 25% below the trend yield, I think we have 2012 here in this dot, and this I think is 1988. And I believe this is 1993. So you can sort of see our biggest recent droughts popping up here. Okay, so now that we have oriented ourselves to what is in this chart, the thing that should be striking you is that there is a pretty linear and positive relationship between the percent of the crop that's rated good or excellent in those crop progress and condition reports, and the likelihood and the percent deviation from trend yield, which should make sense. If these survey respondents are any good at judging whether the crop is good or not, then having a higher percent of the crop in the good or excellent category should be related to having higher or above trend yield realizations. Alright, so I'm going to end this video and we'll continue on getting right into this week's exercises in the next video.